In 2007, a series of brutal murders terrorized the city of Dnipro, Ukraine. Mutilated bodies, unimaginable acts of violence, and a mystery that left both police and locals speechless. But what makes these crimes even more horrifying is that the killers filmed every gruesome detail of their atrocities. Today, we delve into the case of the Dnepropetrovsk Maniacs, one of the darkest and most disturbing stories of recent decades. During the summer of 2007, the city of Dnipro became the stage for a series of murders that would plunge the entire region into a state of fear. Between June and July, bodies began to appear in isolated places, parks, forests, and pathways far away from the busy streets. The level of brutality was beyond comprehension. The victims were found mutilated in ways that horrified even the most seasoned investigators. Some bodies showed signs of extreme torture, with clear evidence that the killers had taken their time. The killings seemed random, with no clear connection between the victims. It didn't matter if you were young, old, male, or female. Everyone was a potential target. And that's what made these murders so terrifying. There was no pattern, no motive, nothing to give anyone a sense of safety. The discovery of each new body sent waves of panic through the city. People began avoiding isolated areas, especially at night. The streets that were once busy became eerily quiet. The killers were striking during daylight hours in public spaces, leaving behind a trail of horror that no one could ignore. The local media quickly picked up on the story, labeling the attackers the Dnepropetrovsk Maniacs. The entire city was on edge, and no one knew who would be next. The break in the case came on July 23, 2007, when a cell phone belonging to one of the victims was found. This phone would prove to be the key that led investigators straight to two seemingly ordinary young men, Viktor Sayenko and Igor Suprunyuk, both just 19 years old. Viktor and Igor were childhood friends, known in their neighborhood but not for anything particularly alarming. They came from good families, had no criminal records, and seemed like average teenagers. But beneath the surface, they were hiding a dark obsession. As investigators dug deeper, what they found was beyond disturbing. Viktor and Igor weren't just killers, they were documenting their crimes. The two had been recording their murders on video, capturing every gruesome detail. Their phones held videos that would shock the world. These videos showed the two men brutally torturing their victims, laughing, mocking, and showing absolutely no remorse. One particularly infamous video, which would later leak online under the name 3 Guys, 1 Hammer, shows the pair attacking a man with a hammer and screwdriver. The man begs for his life while they continue to beat him to death, all while smiling into the camera. The police now had their suspects, but what baffled everyone was the complete lack of any apparent motive. Viktor and Igor weren't killing for money, revenge, or even out of anger. They were killing purely for the thrill of it, and for the twisted satisfaction of filming their own acts of violence. As the investigation continued, the full scope of Viktor Sayenko and Igor Suprunyuk's crimes came to light. The videos found on their phones were just the beginning. These two killers had been on a killing spree, targeting anyone they came across, with no regard for who their victims were. The most infamous of these videos was the one that would later be known as 3 Guys, 1 Hammer. In this disturbing footage, the two men mercilessly beat a man to death using a hammer and a screwdriver. The video is difficult to watch. The victim, a homeless man named Sergei Yatsenko, is shown lying helplessly on the ground as they laugh, taking turns stabbing and striking him. The cruelty on display is unimaginable. But this wasn't their only recorded crime. In total, police discovered that Viktor and Igor had filmed at least 5 murders, capturing every moment of terror their victims experienced. In some clips, they mocked the dying victims, standing over them as if they were trophies. The killers showed no fear of being caught and no empathy for the people whose lives they destroyed. The killers had developed a sick routine. They would find their victims, attack them in secluded areas, and film the aftermath, often posing with the bodies. They recorded everything, from the killings themselves to the moments when they wiped the blood off their tools. For them, these videos weren't just memories, they were trophies. In addition to the murders, Viktor and Igor were also known for torturing animals before escalating to humans. The police found several videos of them killing stray dogs and cats, again laughing and showing complete indifference to suffering. This progression from animals to humans is a well-known pattern among some of the most dangerous serial killers in history. What's even more disturbing is that they had plans to continue their killing spree. They had set a goal for themselves to kill as many people as possible, documenting every single one. They were on their way to becoming some of the most prolific serial killers in history when they were finally caught. As the police unraveled the full extent of Viktor Sayenko and Igor Suprunyuk's crimes, one question loomed large: why? What could drive two young men from seemingly normal backgrounds to commit such horrific acts of violence, all while documenting it for their own twisted pleasure? Psychologists and investigators struggled to find a clear motive. Viktor and Igor didn't kill for money, revenge, or any of the usual reasons associated with murder. They weren't part of a cult, they weren't motivated by political ideologies, and they had no history of abuse or trauma that might explain their behavior. Instead, it seemed that their motive was shockingly simple: boredom. Reports from the investigation revealed that both Viktor and Igor were thrill seekers. They were searching for something that would give them an adrenaline rush, and that search led them down a path of increasing cruelty. Starting with animals, they escalated to humans, using murder as a way to feel powerful and in control. One of the most chilling aspects of their case was the killer's obsession with filming their murders. These weren't just casual recordings. Viktor and Igor saw themselves as directors of their own snuff films, carefully capturing every detail of their victims' suffering. In some ways, the camera became as much a weapon as the hammer and screwdriver they used in their attacks. But there was something even more sinister about their motives. Both young men were fascinated by the idea of creating history through their crimes. They wanted notoriety, they wanted to be remembered. In fact, in one interview, Igor reportedly said, "I want to make something that people will talk about for years to come." For them, the act of killing was a way to leave their mark on the world. This lust for attention and fame, coupled with their complete lack of empathy, created a deadly combination. They were driven not only by a desire to kill, but by a desire to be immortalized through their crimes. The videos, in their minds, would cement their legacy, making them infamous long after they were caught. The psychological analysis conducted after their arrest revealed disturbing patterns. Both Viktor and Igor exhibited psychopathic tendencies, including a complete lack of remorse or guilt. They seemed to enjoy the fear and suffering of their victims, relishing in the power they held over life and death. For them, murder wasn't just an act of violence, it was a game. The spree of terror unleashed by Viktor Sayenko and Igor Suprunyuk seemed unstoppable. They were growing bolder, attacking their victims in more public areas, showing no fear of being caught. But as is often the case with such killers, it was their arrogance and carelessness that eventually led to their downfall. On July 23, 2007, the police got their first real break in the case. One of the victims' mobile phones had been stolen by the killers after the murder. Viktor and Igor, believing they were untouchable, decided to sell the phone to a local pawn shop. What they didn't know was that the phone was still being tracked by the authorities. The pawn shop owner, unaware of the phone's connection to the murders, took the device. When it was traced back to the shop, police questioned the owner, who provided them with descriptions of the two young men who had sold it. This was the first real lead the police had. Using the descriptions, investigators began to monitor local activity, and just a few days later they arrested Viktor and Igor as they were casually walking through the streets of Dnipro. The arrest was swift, and the evidence against them was overwhelming. When the police searched their homes, they uncovered a treasure trove of incriminating evidence. Multiple videos of the murders were found on their mobile phones, along with stolen items from the victims and the weapons used in their brutal attacks. There was no denying their guilt. During the interrogation, both men showed no sign of remorse. Instead, they seemed detached, almost as if they didn't grasp the gravity of what they had done. When confronted with the videos of their crimes, Viktor and Igor reportedly watched them without emotion, as if they were watching a movie rather than real-life footage of their own atrocities. Their coldness during questioning only confirmed what the police already suspected. These were not ordinary criminals. Viktor and Igor were thrill killers, motivated by the sheer pleasure of causing pain and death. and in their minds, they were untouchable, destined for infamy. The public was shocked by the speed with which they were caught, but even more horrified by the sheer amount of evidence found. It became clear that had they not been caught, Viktor and Igor would have continued killing, fulfilling their plan to murder as many people as possible. The trial of Viktor Sayenko and Igor Suprunyuk began in 2008, and it immediately became a media sensation. The people of Ukraine and the world were captivated by the sheer brutality of the crimes, and everyone wanted to understand how these two young men could be capable of such horrific acts. The evidence against Viktor and Igor was overwhelming. The prosecution presented the videos of the murders, which showed the killers torturing their victims in gruesome detail. Many in the courtroom were unable to watch the footage. Some members of the audience even had to leave, unable to handle the graphic nature of the recordings. In addition to the videos, there were personal items from the victims found in their possession, the murder weapons, and testimonies from witnesses who had seen Viktor and Igor in the areas where the murders took place. The case against them was airtight. Throughout the trial, both Viktor and Igor showed little emotion. They barely reacted to the testimony and the evidence presented against them. When asked why they committed the murders, they gave vague and nonsensical answers, further highlighting their lack of remorse. The court found both men guilty of 21 counts of murder, and they were sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Their accomplice, Alexander Hanza, who had participated in some of the robberies but not the murders, was sentenced to 9 years in prison. The verdict brought some relief to the families of the victims, but the horrors of what Viktor and Igor had done would haunt Dnipro for years to come. The footage of their crimes leaked online, spread across the globe, and despite their capture, the legacy of the Dnepropetrovsk Maniacs lived on in the darkest corners of the internet. While the trial had ended, the trauma left behind by their spree of killings was far from over. Many in the courtroom, from jurors to spectators, were left scarred by the details of the case, and the city of Dnipro struggled to shake off the fear that had gripped it for months. Even after Viktor Sayenko and Igor Suprunyuk were sentenced to life imprisonment, the chilling legacy of the Dnepropetrovsk Maniacs lingered far beyond the courtroom. Their murders, especially the infamous video "Three Guys, One Hammer," had spread across the dark corners of the internet, haunting anyone unfortunate enough to witness the footage. The leaked video became a symbol of the extreme lengths humans can go to in their cruelty, and despite efforts to remove it, fragments of the footage still circulate, serving as a grim reminder of their crimes. The case left deep scars on the city of Dnipro, a community that had once known peace but was now associated with one of the most gruesome killing sprees in recent history. The local population, especially the families of the victims, continued to grapple with the horrors inflicted on their loved ones. For many, the trauma remains fresh, as the details of the case became etched into the collective memory of the region. Beyond the local impact, the story of the Dnepropetrovsk Maniacs sparked conversations worldwide about the accessibility of violent content on the internet, the nature of modern crime, and the disturbing rise of thrill killers who kill for the sake of fame. This case is a stark reminder of the darkest corners of humanity, where violence, narcissism, and the desire for notoriety collide. Today, Viktor and Igor remain behind bars, but the terror they unleashed and the videos they recorded have left an indelible mark. The Dnepropetrovsk Maniacs will forever be remembered, not just for their horrific acts, but for how they took pleasure in documenting and sharing them with the world.